A guy made $15 million selling rocks. Another inventor filled a superhero with corn syrup and broken glass, and it became a legend. And one doll talked so much that it inspired an entire generation of smart toys. The Christmas toys from the 60s, 70s, and 80s weren't just toys. They were tiny miracles of innovation that changed childhood forever. And the stories behind how they were created will blow your mind. The decades between 1960 and 1989 represent the most creative, ambitious, and downright wild era in toy history. This was the time when inventors were taking massive risks, when designers were thinking outside every possible box, and when the impossible became possible in toy aisles across America. These weren't just products, they were breakthroughs. The first doll that could actually talk, the fastest toy cars ever made, a puzzle so brilliant it became a worldwide obsession, action figures that completely redefined what toys could be, and innovation so clever that we're still using the same techniques today. What you're about to hear are the real stories behind the toys that defined Christmas morning for millions of kids. The crazy experiments, the genius moments, the wild success stories, and the pure creativity that made these toys legendary. Let's set the scene. It's 1960. The toy industry is pretty basic. You've got wooden blocks, simple dolls with painted faces, metal cars that barely roll, and board games that haven't changed in decades. Kids are bored with the same old stuff. Parents want to give their children something special, and toy companies are desperate to create the next big thing. But there's a challenge. Technology is limited. Manufacturing is expensive. And nobody really knows what will capture kids' imaginations. There's no focus groups, no data analytics, no social media to test ideas. Just inventors with wild concepts and the courage to try them. This creates an amazing environment for innovation. No rules, no templates, this is how toys are supposed to work. Just pure creativity and the willingness to fail spectacularly or succeed beyond anyone's wildest dreams. What happens next is 3 decades of incredible breakthroughs. Some toys succeed because of brilliant engineering, others because of genius marketing, and a few because of pure dumb luck and perfect timing. But it all starts with a revolutionary idea that would change dolls forever. And the crazy part? The inventor got the idea from radio technology. Chatty Cathy. The first talking toy revolution. 1960. Ruth and Elliot Handler at Mattel have a problem. Barbie is selling like crazy, but they want another hit. They want to create something that's never been done before. A doll that can actually talk. But here's the challenge. There are no computer chips, no digital voice recording. They're working with 1960s technology, which means they have to get creative. The solution? A miniature phonograph record. Think about how genius this is. They took the same technology used in record players, miniaturized it, and built it into a doll. The voice was recorded onto a tiny record inside the doll's body. When you pulled a string on her back, it wound up a spring mechanism that spun the record and activated a small speaker. The voice came from June Foray, a legendary voice actress who also voiced Rocky the Flying Squirrel. She recorded 11 different phrases that Chatty Cathy could say. I love you. Please take me with you. Let's play house. Simple phrases, but they were revolutionary because this was the first mass-produced toy that could actually speak. The engineering was done by Jack Ryan, Mattel's head of research and development. Ryan was a genius inventor who held over 1,000 patents during his career. He figured out how to make the mechanism small enough to fit inside a doll, durable enough to survive kids playing with it, and cheap enough to mass produce. At $18, which is about $140 in today's money, Chatty Cathy was expensive, but parents bought her anyway because she represented the future. This wasn't just a doll. This was technology and imagination combined into something magical. Chatty Cathy became the second best-selling doll of the 1960s, right behind Barbie, and she created an entirely new category of toys. After Chatty Cathy, companies rushed to make talking versions of everything. Talking robots, talking telephones, talking stuffed animals. The whole toy industry shifted because one team figured out how to put a voice inside a toy. That's innovation. Taking existing technology, applying it in a completely new way, and creating something that changes everything. But while Mattel was revolutionizing dolls, another company was about to change how boys played, and they did it with the most brilliant marketing trick in toy history. G.I. Joe, the invention that changed everything. 1964, Stanley Weston, a licensing agent, walks into Hasbro with a pitch. He wants to make a doll for boys, but he knows that won't work. Boys don't play with dolls. That's the cultural reality of the 1960s. So Weston and Hasbro come up with something brilliant. They invent an entirely new term, action figure. This is marketing genius at its finest. The toy is functionally identical to a doll, 12 inches tall, 21 moving joints, interchangeable clothes and accessories. You can pose it, dress it, create stories with it. It's a doll in every way. But by calling it an action figure, they completely reframe what it is. Now it's not about playing house. It's about adventure, military missions, heroic action. It's masculine and tough instead of feminine and domestic. The design was inspired by an artist's wooden mannequin that Weston saw in an art store window. He thought, what if we made that into a toy? What if boys could pose a figure in any position they wanted? Hasbro went all in on the concept. Each G.I. Joe came with realistic military uniforms and equipment. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. The packaging included paper service manuals that made it feel authentic. This wasn't just a toy. It was a miniature soldier. The results were staggering. First-year sales hit $16.9 million. By year two, $36 million. G.I. Joe accounted for 66% of Hasbro's total toy revenue, one product carrying two-thirds of the entire company. Stanley Weston sold the concept to Hasbro for just $100,000 with no royalties. In hindsight, he could have made hundreds of millions. But he still changed toy history forever. G.I. Joe proved that you could take an existing concept, reframe it, and create an entirely new market. That lesson influenced every action figure that came after. Star Wars figures, He-Man, Transformers, everything. None of that exists without G.I. Joe breaking down the barrier first. That's the power of creative thinking. Not just making a new toy, but changing how people think about what toys can be. And speaking of creative thinking, let's talk about what happened when California car culture met toy design. Hot Wheels. When design meets speed. 1967, Elliot Handler is on vacation in Europe, watching his grandchildren play with Matchbox cars. These are the standard toy cars of the era. Small, die-cast, realistic. But Handler notices something. They barely roll. Kids have to push them constantly because the wheels have so much resistance. Handler sees an opportunity. What if we made cars that actually roll fast? What if we made them look like custom hot rods instead of regular cars? He brings the idea back to Mattel and hires Harry Bentley Bradley, a designer who worked at General Motors. Bradley had actually designed the Dodge Diora concept car while moonlighting from his GM job. Bradley's approach was revolutionary. Instead of making realistic cars, he created fantasy vehicles, low-slung bodies, exaggerated proportions, wild paint schemes using this incredible Spectra Flame finish that looked like liquid metal. The engineering was just as impressive. Hot Wheels used special low-friction wheel bearings that made the cars roll incredibly fast. Kids could set up long track runs and watch the cars maintain speed through loops and curves. The original 16 models, called the Sweet 16, launched in 1967. Kids went absolutely crazy for them. But here's what made Hot Wheels truly genius. The business model wasn't about selling one car. It was about building a system. You buy a car, then you buy track. Then you buy launchers. Then you buy more track to make bigger layouts. Then you buy more cars to race against each other. It's an ecosystem where each product makes the others more valuable. To date, Hot Wheels has sold over 4 billion cars, making it the best-selling toy vehicle in history. And it forced every competitor to completely rethink their approach. Hot Wheels didn't just enter the market, they redefined what toy cars could be. That's the result of combining great design with smart engineering and understanding what kids actually want. Not realism, not accuracy, just speed, style, and imagination. But while some toys succeeded through brilliant design, others succeeded through pure, absurdist genius. And nobody represents that better than the pet rock. Pet rock, the greatest joke that became a fortune. 1975, Gary Dahl is in a bar, listening to his friends complain about their pets. Dogs need walks, cats need feeding, fish tanks need cleaning. Everything requires work. Dahl, probably a few drinks in, makes a joke. What if you had a pet that required zero maintenance? A pet rock. His friends laugh. But Dahl keeps thinking about it, and he realizes something brilliant. The 1970s are weird. An absurdist product sold with complete sincerity might actually work. So he sources smooth stones from a Mexican beach at 1 cent each. He creates packaging that commits fully to the joke. Cardboard box with breathing holes, a bed of straw like it's a living creature. And here's the genius part, an instruction manual. The manual is comedy gold. Training your pet rock. Commands it already knows, like sit and stay. How to make it feel comfortable in its new home. Tips on exercise, which basically involves carrying it around. The whole thing is delivered with perfect deadpan humor. Dahl starts selling them locally. Then he gets media attention. Newsweek writes about it. The story goes national. Suddenly, everyone wants a pet rock. Not because they need one, because it's funny, it's weird, and everyone's talking about it. In 1975 alone, Dahl sells over 1 million pet rocks at $4 each. That's $15 million in revenue. His cost per rock is 1 cent. Even after packaging and distribution, the profit margins are incredible. Gary Dahl becomes a millionaire selling rocks. Actual rocks. The pet rock phenomenon proved something important. In the right cultural moment, with the right presentation, you can sell anything. It's not about the product. It's about the story you tell around the product. The fad died quickly. By 1976, it was over. But the lesson lasted forever. Sometimes the best innovations aren't technological. They're conceptual. And speaking of conceptual brilliance, let's talk about a toy that combined art, mathematics, and engineering into something that became a worldwide obsession. Rubik's Cube. When a puzzle becomes a phenomenon. 1974, Erno Rubik, a Hungarian professor of architecture, is trying to teach his students about three-dimensional geometry. He wants to create a model that demonstrates how objects can move independently while remaining connected as a whole structure. He builds a small cube made of smaller cubes that can rotate on different axes. After building it, he scrambles the colors. Then, he tries to solve it. It takes him over a month to figure out his own puzzle. Rubik realizes he's created something special. Not just a teaching tool, an incredibly difficult, deeply engaging puzzle that's unlike anything else. He patents it in Hungary in 1975 as the Magic Cube. The toy gets licensed for international sale in 1978, but it doesn't explode until 1980, when Ideal Toy Corp starts marketing it aggressively in the United States. The name changes to Rubik's Cube, and television advertising introduces it to millions of kids and adults. What happens next is extraordinary. The puzzle becomes the fastest-selling toy in history. Between 1980 and 1983, over 200 million cubes were sold worldwide. People are carrying them everywhere, solving them on buses, in waiting rooms, during lunch breaks. Speed cubing competitions start forming. Guinness Book of World Records sponsors championships. The beauty of the Rubik's Cube is its elegant complexity. The rules are simple. Get each face to show one solid color. But the number of possible configurations is 43 quintillion. That's 43 with 18 zeros after it. Yet there's always a solution, and with the right algorithms, you can solve any configuration. By January 2024, Approximately 500 million Rubik's Cubes have been sold, making it the world's best-selling puzzle of all time. Erno Rubik created something that's simultaneously a toy, a puzzle, a teaching tool, and an art form. It works on multiple levels for different people, which is why it has staying power decades later. But if the Rubik's Cube represents elegant complexity, our next toy represents something completely different. Pure, simple fun combined with the most unexpected solution to an engineering problem. Stretch Armstrong, the corn syrup superhero. 1976, designer Jesse Horowitz at Kenner has an idea. What if we made a toy that you could stretch like taffy, and it would snap back to its original shape? He creates early prototypes using coiled springs as the internal structure. But there's a problem. If the latex skin tears, kids could cut themselves on the exposed metal springs. It's too dangerous. Engineer Jeep Kuhn, a chemical engineer and vice president of research and development, suggests a completely different approach. What if we filled it with something viscous instead of using springs? Kuhn, Horowitz, and model maker Richie Dobeck go to a grocery store and buy bottles of Caro corn syrup. They bring it back to the lab, boil it to remove air bubbles, and start experimenting. They're literally in a laboratory, pouring corn syrup into latex molds, stretching them, testing limits, trying to find the perfect viscosity. It's absurd and brilliant at the same time. Once they nail the formula, they add tiny particles of glass and wood to increase volume and get the right consistency. The toy comes with 10 tiny bandages because small tears are inevitable. When the syrup leaks out, it's this reddish gel that kids thought looked like blood, which somehow made it even cooler. Stretch Armstrong could extend from 13 inches to over 4 feet before snapping back to normal. You could tie him in knots, pull his arms and legs in opposite directions, do things that would destroy any normal toy. And he just kept bouncing back. The toy made over $50 million in its first year. Kids loved it because it felt indestructible. You could play rough with Stretch Armstrong in ways you couldn't with other toys. The fact that this iconic toy is basically just corn syrup, latex, and glass particles is hilarious. The solution was so simple, so unexpected, and so perfect. That's the beauty of creative problem solving. Sometimes the answer isn't high-tech. Sometimes it's literally food ingredients from a grocery store, combined in a way nobody thought to try before. The Christmas toys from the 60s, 70s, and 80s represent something special in American history. This was the last era before computers, before smartphones, before digital everything. Toys had to be clever mechanically, because there were no microchips to do the work. That constraint forced innovation. Engineers couldn't just program a toy to talk. They had to figure out how to put a record player inside a doll. Designers couldn't rely on screens and apps. They had to make physical objects interesting enough to hold a child's attention for hours. The result was an explosion of creativity that we haven't seen since. These weren't just products. They were small miracles of engineering, design, and imagination. Think about what these toys taught us. Chatty Cathy showed us that toys could have personality. G.I. Joe taught us that presentation matters as much as the product. Hot Wheels demonstrated that style and performance could coexist. Pet Rock proved that humor and absurdity have value. Rubik's Cube showed us that challenge and difficulty can be fun. Stretch Armstrong taught us that resilience is cool. The inventors behind these toys were taking huge risks. But the people who made them believed in their ideas enough to try. And when they succeeded, they didn't just make money. They created cultural touchstones that defined childhood for millions of people. We can't recreate that era. Technology has changed. Culture has changed. The toy industry has changed. But we can learn from it. We can remember that the best innovations come from creative people willing to take risks. The next time you see a classic toy from this era, don't just see nostalgia. See the innovation. See the creative risks. see the moment when someone figured out something new and changed play forever. That's the real story of the golden age of toys. Not just what was created, but the spirit of creativity and innovation that made it all possible.